send me your peace, or I am lost for sure. Oh, here I am, yearning for your cure. This humble servant will be diverted from you no more.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah's peace and blessings be on each and every one of you. I'd like to welcome you, dear viewers, to another in our series, The Best of Tawheed. And in this series, we are looking at the various evidences and the various elements which constitute the concept or the body of knowledge which represents the fundamental concept of Unitarianism or Islamic monotheism from the Islamic perspective. Allah's unique unity as understood in Islam. In our previous two episodes, we looked at two aspects of that concept, maintaining the unique unity of Allah. We looked at it with regards to His dominion over the creation, where He has no rival. And we looked at it with regards to Allah's attributes, what defines Allah and distinguishes Him from His creation. In this episode, we'll be looking at the fruit of all that, because that is a means, a way to achieve a particular end. Because remember, we said this concept of Tawheed, maintaining Allah's unity, is a life concept. It is the essence of Islam. It is how we perceive the world that we live in and how we live within it. That Allah's unique unity must be maintained in all aspects of our lives. So what we're coming to now is the fruit of those previous two aspects. The most important aspect of Allah's unique unity, and that is worship. Who do we worship? How do we worship? When do we worship? Where do we worship? All of this is summarized or condensed into this third area. Worship in Islam, in Arabic, is called ibadah. Term ibadah is taken from abd, a slave, one whose will is completely submitted to God. So worship is the submission of human will to God. It is Islam. It is the essence of Islam, that we worship God in everything that we do, or as much as possible. That worship, for it to be uniquely focused on God alone and not given to or directed at aspects of His creation, then we have to maintain Allah's dominion and His unique attributes, so that when the time comes now to worship, which is the fruit of Tawheed, it is done in the correct manner. So this is the relevance of the third aspect of Tawheed. And what is important about this is that many people recognize Allah's existence and that He is the creator, sustainer, His attributes, etc. They recognize this, and still they will worship other than Allah. And Allah points that out in Surah Az-Zukhruf, 43rd chapter, verse 87. وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَهُمْ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. If you ask them who created them, they would surely say Allah. This is in reference to the polytheists, the idolaters found in Arabia at the time, if they were asked, they would say Allah. He is the one who created them. However, they worshipped other gods along with Allah. So it is not sufficient just to identify Allah as the creator and sustainer and give him his attributes. What is required beyond that is that he is the only one who we should worship. And that aspect is maintained when we understand what constitutes worship. What is the essence of worship? First and foremost, worship is obedience to Allah. It is doing whatever is pleasing to Allah and avoiding whatever is displeasing to Him. So worship involves obedience to Allah, meaning obedience to Allah's commands, whatever Allah has commanded us, whatever His Messenger has commanded us. By obeying those commands, we worship Allah. Also, worship of Allah involves calling on Allah for our needs. Now, if we call on others besides Allah, believing that they can fulfill our needs, and that is not looking at the people within the creation around us. Yes, we can ask our father, our son, our brother, our neighbor, our friends to do things for us, and they do things. So that's not what we're talking about. We don't pray to our children, our parents, neighbors. We're not praying when we ask them, can you give me a hand here? That's not prayer. Prayer is when we call on a higher power who is beyond us, who is not in our presence here, beyond us. When we call on that higher power who is not present before us, that involves worship. That calling involves worship. That's why the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, himself, had stated in no uncertain terms, ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah. Dua, or supplication, that calling, is the essence of worship. So if we're saying we only worship Allah, but we call on saints, angels, supernatural beings, the jinn, or the dead, if we call on them to help us in various circumstances, then that constitutes worship of them. And even to believe that they could do things for us, which are in fact godly things, what we have done is we have given these elements of God's creation the attributes of Allah. When Allah has clearly told us in the Quran, Ud'uni astajib lakum, call on me in worship, and I will answer you. He is the only one who can answer our prayers. And that is why in our daily prayer, we are required to repeat 17 times a day, Iyaka na'budu. You alone do we worship. We don't worship any besides you. You alone do we worship. So that has to be translated into our daily lives in practical terms. Whether it is in the mosque, the actual formal prayers that we make, that's quite obvious. That is to Allah. Or it is our private supplications. After our formal prayers, we raise our hand and we call on Allah. He is the one we should be calling on. Some people call also on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, believing that he can answer their prayers. Such a practice constitutes violation of this aspect, the most important aspect of Tawheed. And that is Tawheed al-Ibadah, or maintaining the unique unity of Allah with regards to His worship. So we can find so many aspects of worship. We mentioned one, which is the actual prayer, but also in terms of trust, love, and a variety of other emotions in its full sense should be directed to Allah alone. So you find in the Quran, Allah states in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 23, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَتَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Put your trust in Allah if you are truly believers. That the trust, we trust people all the time. This is our nature, that we ask people to do things, they say they're going to do it, and we trust that they're going to do it. But in reality, people will always break our trusts. So in the end, we really need to put our trust in the one who will never break our trust. And that is Allah alone. So it is He who we should ultimately put our trust. Even when we say to somebody, okay, I trust you're going to do this, in the back of our minds, or even added, we believe and we trust in Allah that what that person has said or promised they're going to do, they will in fact do. They will do it if it is Allah's will, that they will be allowed to do it, because maybe they have the best of intentions to do it for you. But they can only do it if Allah allows them to do it. So then, who ultimately do we need to put our trust in? It has to be Allah, ultimately. We trust people day to day because that's normal. But we have to trust beyond those people, because we have to know that people are not perfect. They may deliberately break our trust because other considerations came up, or they may not be able to fulfill what they promised because Allah's qadr, what Allah has determined, does not allow them to do it. So there are these factors which are beyond human control. And that is why Allah said, for the true believers, their trust is in Allah. And with that, we're going to take a break from our look at the most critical aspect of Tawheed, the fruit of what we looked at before, Tawheed al-Ibadah, or maintaining the unique unity of Allah with regards to His worship. We'll take the break now, and we will see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the break. We find many verses in the Quran which call us to maintain the various elements of worship which belong only to Allah with Allah. So whether it has to do with our love, and Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah verse 165, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. There are among human beings those who take for worship others besides Allah as equals to Him. They love them as they should only love Allah. But those who believe have a much greater love of Allah. So, though love in and of itself is not ibadah, is not worship. We love our wives and husbands, our children, our parents, our neighbors, friends, etc. That love is not worship. But worship of Allah, in terms of love, is expressed in our obedience to Allah. That is an expression of love. Because when you love somebody, you will do whatever they tell you to do. If you love someone, you say you love someone, but every time they ask you to do this or that, you say, no, I can't do it, I don't have time, I'm busy, and whatever, then there's a big question mark. Do you really love this person? So obedience is the open manifestation of love. So when we're talking about loving Allah and not loving His creation greater than we love Allah, we're talking about obeying Allah over and above His creation. That is why the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, had said, لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. That Allah's creation, the creation, should not be obeyed if it involves disobedience to the Creator. So you might love your child, and your child wants to do something which is displeasing to Allah. If you are truly loving Allah, then you will not do it. Because your love for Allah is greater than your love for your child, then you will obey Allah and displease your child because your child wanted to do this, or your husband, or your parents. Any of those around you who you love may ask you to do things which are in fact displeasing to God. When you seek to please them and do these things, then that is indicative of your love for them being greater than your love for Allah. So this element of worship involves our love, our trust, our fear, a variety of human emotions, which may be valid when dealing with the creation on a limited scale, but when we're dealing in the ultimate scale, then this is due only to Allah. So obedience, as we said, is the essence of worship. We worship Allah with this obedience when we hold this obedience above the obedience to Allah's creation. So on one occasion, when one of the companions of the Prophet by the name of Adi ibn Hatim, who had recently converted from Christianity, he heard Allah's messenger saying, quoting a verse from the Quran, which was in Surah At-Tawbah, verse 31, they have taken their rabbis and monks as lords besides Allah. So, having heard that, Adi said to the Prophet ﷺ, surely we did not worship them. Because his understanding of worship means that they prayed to their monks and rabbis, but they didn't do that. That wasn't what they were doing. So he clarified this. And then the Prophet ﷺ went on to say to him, did they not make forbidden what Allah made allowable? And you all made it forbidden? He said, yeah, we did. And did they not make permissible what Allah made forbidden, and you all made it permissible? He said, yes, we did that too. He said, that was how you worship them. They made impermissible or forbidden what Allah made permissible. For example, they made marriage for the priests impermissible. Allah made it permissible for men to marry. And they said priests and nuns should not marry. This is the Catholics. So they've made impermissible what Allah made permissible. Similarly, they made permissible what Allah made impermissible. How did they do that? Pork. Pork, which is a favorite amongst Christians, Christian nations of the world. They love pork in all of its forms. But Allah forbade it. It's forbidden in the Quran. It is forbidden in the Bible. And of course, that's what's most relevant. In the Bible itself, we find clear verses in which pork has been made impermissible. But Christians today have abandoned those verses. Jews still follow it, so they don't eat pork. But for Christians, they eat pork. So this making permissible what Allah made forbidden, this was done by who? It was done by the people of the church, the elders, the monks, their scholars. They made it permissible because the Bible doesn't say it's permissible. They reinterpreted, changed, modified until it became acceptable to eat pork, even though it was clearly forbidden in the Old Testament, in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy, clearly forbidden. So that process by which they made permissible what Allah made impermissible, and made impermissible what Allah made permissible, this acceptance of that constituted worship of them. And this is the point that the Prophet Muhammad was making to Adi ibn Hatim. And as such, that is why, as a general principle, we as Muslims, those who believe in Allah, we are supposed to follow the law of Allah. We should have the laws which Allah has prescribed in the Sharia. We should have it in our various countries. That is the proper way. And that is what Allah expressed when He said in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 44, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. Those who do not rule by what Allah has revealed are in fact disbelievers. In their actions are similar to that of the disbelievers. It's not necessarily meaning that a Muslim who passes a law or follows a law which goes against the law of Allah, that they are disbelievers. No, but Allah has made a similitude that they are similar to the disbelievers in the sense that they follow these laws which are against the laws of Allah. So worship of Allah involves living a life which is pleasing to Allah, wherein we try to do whatever is pleasing to Allah. But we can only achieve that if we know who Allah is. We are aware of His uniqueness in terms of His dominion over creation, as well as in terms of His general attributes which distinguish Him from His creation. Having understood that, we can then worship Allah alone. We can live lives in which we have sought to please Allah in all of its aspects. With that, dear viewers, we'd like to thank you for being in this segment of our episode from the best of Tawheed. And we hope that you will continue to follow the coming episodes in which we further look at the unity of Allah, maintaining that unity in all aspects of our lives. With that, dear viewers, we bid you now farewell until we see you in our next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Oh Lord, here I am, pleading at your door. Send me your mercy, send me your peace, or I am lost for sure. Oh Lord, here I am, pleading at your door. Send me your mercy, send me your peace, or I am lost for sure. Oh Lord, here I am, yearning for your cure. This humble servant will be diverted from you no more. No